In 1675, the French physician Pierre Barat wrote a curious, funny, and perhaps slightly lame dedication for his new book. Instead of the usual outright praise for his patron, Barat wrote, "Monsieur, I have only coldness for you, and all the admiration I have for your merit cannot draw anything but cold from me." Pierre Barat's dedication was no more than a silly, attention-grabbing joke from a physician to his patron, as he quickly made clear. "Do not fear that I will describe stories of illnesses to you, or the diversity of remedies that have been found to cure them, and that I would bore you with the barbaric terms of medicine, but accept, monsieur, that I present you with coldnesses that were formerly the delights of the Greeks, the thrills of the Romans, and which now form the common pleasure of all the nations on earth." The transhistorical and transnational coldness that, according to Barat, had delighted the Greeks, the Romans, and now every corner of the world, was the simple pleasure of a chilled drink. Known since earliest antiquity, drinks chilled with ice or snow spread rapidly in early modern Europe. Starting in the 16th century, elites in Southern Europe increasingly embraced drinks chilled with snow or ice in summer. By the early 17th century, most Southern European cities had well-oiled infrastructure to keep inhabitants supplied with ice at all times. This ostensibly banal fashion sparked a print war that would last for more than 2 centuries. By the time Pierre Barat wrote his goofy letter, more than 50 treatises had already been published on the topic of cold. By the end of the 18th century, 40 more treatises testified to the brainpower and ink that writers dedicated to the medical effects of cold. Like Pierre Barat, it's not my intention today to bore you with descriptions of diseases, cures, and obscure medical terms. Rather, my talk will trace some of the argumentative strategies employed by the authors engaged in this print war. I will focus on the types of evidence that physicians harnessed when crafting arguments in the cold drinking debate. Authors drew their evidence from classical scholarship, geography, travel literature, natural philosophy, and everyday experience. If Barat could proclaim the cold drink and its ascent from ancient Greece through Rome to every corner of his contemporary world, it was because iced drinks occupied a peculiar place in the early modern Republic of Letters. Iced drinks were viewed as a distinctly new fashion in early modern writing, even if their ancient origins were very well documented in classical sources. The physicians who contributed to the print war on cold drinks cited ancient authorities on the subject, situating iced drinks in historical time. Authors just as eagerly recorded the contemporary development of chilling habits at home and abroad. In the medical literature, iced drinks were both ancient and contemporary, both foreign and familiar. And so a local habit of everyday consumption took on transhistorical and global dimensions in the medical imagination of the Republic of Letters. Nonetheless, treatises about cold drinking always reflected the positionality of their authors in time and space. In the end, cold drinking was something practiced, enjoyed, and intellectualized locally. Before delving into the medical debate, let's for a minute consider the basics of iced consumption. There were several ways to cool drinks in the pre-modern world. Bottles could be placed in wells, cellars, or other cool spaces to be chilled. But refrigeration with ice or snow provided a faster, stronger cooling effect than any of these other methods. The practice of chilling drinks with ice or snow has been known in the Middle East, in Asia, and in Europe since earliest antiquity. Of course, ice and snow were seasonal phenomena in these parts of the world, so they weren't naturally available around the year in most of the places where they were consumed. The pleasure of an iced drink was especially valued in summer, when the cold treat provided the most relieving contrast with ambient heat. To make such ice consumption possible in summer, pre-modern communities harvested naturally occurring snow or ice in winter. They then packed the harvest away underground and insulated it from the changing seasons so that it remained frozen throughout the year. In its basic principle, this cold technology remained largely the same over the centuries, providing a simple but effective method for chilling drinks. But the practicalities of cold harvesting differed according to the characteristics of local taste and environments. Guaranteeing the availability of ice and snow in summer was an effort that kept laborers, entrepreneurs, and administrators busy around the year. Depending on availability and local preferences, communities harvested ice, snow, or both. Harvesting practices varied based on the types of winter, which could be cold or humid, or dry and warm. Communities in mountainous regions harvested differently from those in low-lying areas, and the intensity of cold harvesting also varied over time, with jumps and starts in different places and different periods that can be tricky to trace or to explain. So there's not much visual evidence for pre-modern cold harvesting, but I can show you a few examples. This is the earliest image I found, and it's from it's a manuscript map of the river landscape outside Milan, early 16th century. And if you look at the stick figures in the middle of the image, you can actually see that they're standing on the frozen river and carving blocks of ice out of the frozen river. And the map was made in the context of a legal dispute over the rights to the ice on the frozen river. So we definitely know that this is about ice harvesting. Here's another image from the early 17th century, and it's your typical Little Ice Age winter landscape with the frozen river and people going about their business on the frozen river landscape. But if we zoom in on the middle section, we can see that there's men carving blocks of ice out of the frozen river, and then in the background, loading the ice onto a sled so that the ice can be carried away to storage. Ice harvested from freezing ponds was stored in ice houses. These storage facilities had no standardized form. They emerged as vernacular architecture built ad hoc by workers who applied their own artisanal expertise. Their key purpose was to insulate the harvested ice and snow from outside air and rain. The part of the ice house that actually contained the frozen harvest was dug into the ground because underground storage could better guarantee a steady, low temperature. The conic pit was then covered with a thatched roof made of insulating materials. At the bottom of the pit was a grid with a drainage system to separate meltwater from the frozen harvest. Stored properly, harvested ice and snow could remain frozen for up to 2 years. In Europe, the use of ice or snow gained ground rapidly from the middle of the 16th century onwards. Chilled drinks first appeared in Spain and Italy before moving north over the course of the 17th century. They were used primarily to chill water or wine and sometimes fruit. The frozen stuff was sometimes mixed immediately into the drinks, but it was more commonly placed in cooling buckets and kept separate from the actual drink. In time, other more elaborate uses of ice and snow spread across some consumer contexts. These included fruity desserts, flavored slush, ice cream, and even frozen centerpieces. These preparations relied on the mixing of ice or snow with salt, which provoked a powerful refrigerant reaction that could be used to freeze liquids inside containers stirred into the snow. But again, ice and snow were used first and foremost for simply chilling drinks without freezing anything. Consumption usually took off in April or May, lasting through October, though some consumers chilled their drinks in winter too. Initially, wealthy individuals organized these harvests privately for their own use, but by the late 16th century, major cities around the northern Mediterranean developed infrastructure for the public sale of ice and snow. This centrally controlled expansion of commercial trading in frozen products reflected a gradual increase in the consumption of ice-cold drinks, not just among the ultra-rich, but also among ordinary city dwellers. Witnessing this fast-growing habit, physicians gave their opinion. I've been compiling a database of all the early modern treatises on the medical effects of chilled drinks. By 1700, physicians had written more than 50 of these treatises. That's not counting entries on cold drinking published in larger encyclopedias or medical reference works from the time. By the beginning of the 19th century, there were about 90 of these treatises. The geographical and chronological characteristics of these publications reveal some trends. The first treatises were written by Spanish physicians in the middle of the 16th century. Italians followed later in the 16th century. During the 17th century, the debate moved north with treatises published in France, the Low Countries, and Scandinavia. By the late 17th century, German physicians started writing dissertations about cold drinks. And eventually, in the 18th century, English physicians got their say too. We can assume that these waves of treatises were trends emerging from regional nodes in the medical republic of letters. But the place and pace of publication also roughly followed the spread of ice-cold drinking as a habit, which moved south to north, like the treatises. Though the rise of ice-cold drinks initiated this print war, these treatises were not exclusively about ice-cold drinking. Over time, they came to address a wider set of questions to do with the medical effects of cold. How, for example, did cold drinks impact the effectiveness of medications and medical treatments? And how else could cold be applied medically? Of course, there's no point drawing strict boundaries between diet and medicine in the 16th century. As recent scholarship has shown, early modern regimen books played a crucial role in the everyday management of health. Lifestyle, climate, food, and drink were all thought to influence individual temperaments. If the still dominant Galenic view of the body classified bodies as hot or cold and as dry or humid, gulping down ice-cold liquids was a dietetic choice that concerned physicians a great deal. Indeed, many of the early Spanish commentaries advised against cold drinks. They warned that ice drinks could cause coughs, toothaches, indigestion, kidney stones, and liver damage. Another common warning was that cold drinking could cause harm to the brain in ways that would only become noticeable many years later, by which time the damage would be irreversible. Cold drinks were branded as silent killers, causing overindulgent consumers to meet with an untimely death. The Tuscan physician Pieronati, for example, warned that princes who wanted to savor the pleasure of a cold wine too frequently would pay for it in the end, when, quote, they are molested by very grave infirmity and end the course of their life before their time. In more acute cases, ice water's sudden rush of cold and humidity could drown and extinguish the body's natural heat. As early as 1536, the son of François Ier was rumored to have died of ice water. At the tender age of 18, the Crown Prince of France had been playing a vigorous game of tennis when, sweaty and tired, he reached for the ice water, gulped it down, and died soon after. François and other individuals who died a sudden death were often cited in medical treatises warning against cold drinks. If these accounts sounded alarming, proponents of cold drinks had no trouble arguing the exact opposite. Ice water aided digestion, comforted the stomach, and prevented kidney stones. To counter stories of early death, proponents conjured up stories of people on the brink of death who were quickly cured with the appropriate use of iced water. Part of these disagreements derived from the ambiguities inherited from classical literature and ancient medicine on the subject. The fashion of iced drinks occupied a peculiar temporality in the 16th century. On the one hand, it was perceived as something distinctly new, a fashion that appeared to arise and spread quickly in places where ice drinks had not previously been seen. On the other hand, humanist physicians found plenty of evidence in classical texts that the ancients had chilled their water and wine with snow. Without exception, early modern participants in the debate cited the opinions of Galen, Hippocrates, and Avicenna, teasing out in which specific situations these authors had mentioned, condemned, or recommended cold drinks. But ancient documentation on chilled drinks was not limited to medical writing. Roman authors like the Plinies, Martial, and Seneca also mentioned the everyday use of snow for chilling drinks. Seneca rolled his eyes at the self-indulgence with which the wealthy snowed their drinks. Pliny the Elder also sighed at elites' tireless efforts to go against nature when he described how snow consumption blurred the characteristics of the seasons and of the landscape itself. He wrote, "Some people drink snow, others ice, and turn what is the curse of mountain regions into pleasure for their appetite. Coolness is stored up against the hot weather, and plans are devised to keep snow cold for the months that are strangers to it. Other people first boil their water and then bring even that to a winter temperature. Assuredly, mankind wants nothing to be as nature likes to have it." Seneca and Pliny made distinctly moral arguments against snow drinks in antiquity, and yet mentions of ancient snow consumption spoke to the early modern imagination. Frequently cited was Pliny's description of the ice waters invented by the Emperor Nero, while Pliny the Younger mentioned welcoming friends to his villa with snow to chill their wine. Oft cited were also the military campaigns of Alexander the Great, who allegedly dug snow pits for his soldiers so that they could have chilled drinks while fighting in Asia. The Roman physician Andrea Bacci, for example, wrote, As can be gleaned from good authors, the practice of cooling with snow is very ancient, and especially in cases of necessity and for the use of warriors. Because it can be read that Alexander the Great made plenty of provisions for it in the mountains of Asia, so that he could have it brought along with the troops. Whether ancient authors approved of chilled drinks or not, the mere abundance of snow in ancient writing was strong enough of an endorsement. After citing about a dozen sources, the Spanish physician Nicolás Monardes argued, "Let's consider how much delight the ancients drew from drinking cold, because they were wise and discerning people who pursued the preservation of their health with great diligence. So if the ancients did it, then why shouldn't we?" Monardes's treatise is worth highlighting because it was one of the earliest treatises to fully endorse ice-cold water. It was also by far the treatise on chilled drinks that reached the widest readership and had the biggest impact. Monardes became known for his work on the medicinal properties of plants from the New World, which was translated and read across Europe. He published his treatise on snow as an appendix to his larger blockbuster before publishing it separately. The Libro de la Nieve piggybacked on the success of Monardes's Plants from the New World, and it ended up being translated 5 times. There were 2 early Italian translations and 3 further translations into English, Latin, and German. So the little treatise circulated widely, and its contents showed up frequently in later treatises on cold, cited or uncited. Alongside ancient authorities, Monardes drew on evidence from the Americas to argue the case for snow consumption. While considering whether it was desirable to consume water derived from melted snow, he first cited Hippocrates, who said that the mountain shepherds drank from meltwater streams all the time without damaging their health. Monardes then pointed out that most people in the Americas also drank from rivers that consisted mainly of meltwater. He also considered information on Northern Europe and the Middle East to compare how snow fared in different climates. In other words, the debate on cold drinking didn't just engage different temporal planes, but it also invited physicians to reflect on the consumption habits of people in different places. In fact, most of the treatises made a point of citing all the places in the world where snow or ice were used, whether they were in favor or against chilled drinks. Early Spanish authors argued that chilled drinks were a corrupting habit imported from Northern Europe, a harmful practice brought to Spain through foreign influence. In Italian treatises, the rise and return of snow-chilled drinks were also described as a novelty import, a delicacy in which Italians were lagging behind other places. Andrea Bacci wrote about the chilled drinks consumed in cold, faraway countries, writing, "In Germany, in Flanders, in Hungary, and in Bohemia, they continuously make snow provisions, especially at the courts of princes. And in France more than anywhere else, and especially in Paris." To be very clear, historical evidence suggests that both Spain and Italy were actually ahead of the curve in Europe when it came to cold drinks. In the 17th century, authors writing in Northern Europe would point to Mediterranean Europe as the source of snow-chilled drinks. And they were probably closer to the truth than vice versa. Either way, the perceived directionality of influence differed depending on the author's perspectives. The bottom line being that ice drinks were described as a foreign import everywhere. If authors were quick to point fingers at each other between different parts of Europe, they unanimously pointed to the Eastern Mediterranean as the place where chilled consumption triumphed. Especially the Ottoman Empire became known for its snowy sherbets and other cold treats, despite its warmer climate. In the middle of the 16th century, Monardes already pointed out that snow was used especially in the lands ruled by the Grand Turk, and especially in Constantinople, where the snow is used so much that it's sold publicly and used throughout the year. Over the course of the 16th and 17th centuries, the increasingly popular genre of travel writing provided further information to physicians on the icing habits of the Eastern Mediterranean and beyond. The French traveler and naturalist Pierre Belon published his travel writings on the Eastern Mediterranean and included a dedicated section on the way to keep snow and ice for the whole summer, as the Turks do. Belon explained that street vendors in Constantinople sold cheap sherbets in summer, made of fruit syrups mixed with snow or ice. As a trained humanist, he quickly linked the consumption of snow in Constantinople to the snow-chilled drinks of the Romans, citing Galen and the passage from Pliny that we saw earlier. Having seen the success of snow harvesting and consumption in Turkey, he also remarked that it should be easy enough to store snow and chill drinks with it in France. Writing, "It's certain that this could also easily be done in France, because we've seen several regions with climates warmer than in France, where snow is kept all summer." By the middle of the 17th century, snow harvests and chilled drinks were indeed commonly used in France. By then, the French physicians who started discussing the medical effects of ice drinks were in turn citing Pierre Boullon as an authority on the ice drinks of the Eastern Mediterranean. Pierre Barras, whose dedication we saw at the beginning, wrote, "Under the rule of the Turk and the king of Persia and in all of the Levant, snow is sold publicly, and it is used excessively in Constantinople." And Bolognius remarks that they have vaulted spaces there that are not exposed to the south at all, in which snow is stored. In short, authors were very interested in including information on the icing habits from around the expanding early modern world. In part, this interest was just a matter of curiosity, in which every little trivia about chilling counted. But in the debate about cold drinks, physicians also weighed the importance of place in early modern medicine. As one of the 6 non-naturals, climate, like food and drink, could influence individual temperament. Physicians kept climate in mind when they discussed the ice consumption habits known in places different from their own. This can be seen in the strategic dedications that some of the cold drinking treatises received. In 1621, the physician Matias de Porres wrote a treatise on snow drinks for the new viceroy of Peru, who had moved from Spain to Peru to take up his new position. In his dedication, Porres explained that the change of continents had inspired him to gather the information that he needed to keep his patron and his family healthy in a new climate. "When I arrived in this kingdom, excellent sir, I sought information on the things that could be most helpful to me, to better preserve the health of your excellency and my lady and her daughters, to fulfill the obligation of this post and of my office." After learning that the air in Lima was warm and humid, Porres started an investigation of the snow-chilled waters that could be found around their new home city. But patrons did not need to change continents to receive advice on their consumption of ice drinks in their new climate. In 1650, the French physician Pierre Alceri dedicated his cold drinking treatise to the Duc de Mercoeur, who was about to exchange France for Catalonia as viceroy. In his dedication, Alceri argued that a treatise on ice-cold drinking would be necessary for his patron, so that he might better preserve his health when he arrived in a country where snow-chilled drinks were so much more common than in France. Authors could even stress differences in the quality of the water and air from one city to the next when determining whether ice drinks were appropriate. Writing for his home audience, the Tuscan Pironati stressed that Florence had previously used snow sparingly, but having now adopted the opinion of many that snow is not harmful, but healthy and good, they've started to use it universally, and public shops for snow have opened throughout the year, perhaps following the example of those cities where they attend to such delicacies with greater diligence than here, or where truly they have air that is warmer and more noxious, or where they don't have nice and cool water. Still, authors conceded that health and climate were not everything. Whether cities used snow or not was also a matter of local taste, infrastructure, and culture. These reflections were geared toward local audiences. One Italian translation of Bonardes, for example, added a brief note on the latest developments in refrigeration in Italy. Genova, full of rich people and gentlemen connected to the major delicacies and delights of the world, has known this habit of cold drinking for a while. They have organized themselves to have copious amounts of snow available for private use, but they've also organized efforts and labor in this trade so that everyone can have some. A delight that the Venetians can envy, because I'm surprised that they don't use it or try to use it, even if they have many other delights. As this passage makes clear, the choice to ice drinks could be seen as a mark of refinement, which distinguished communities from one another at every scale. But if this comparison between Genova and Venice only stressed ice drinks as a delightful novelty item, Baldassare Pisanelli from Bologna emphasized the effects of snow consumption on urban public health. In 1586, he wrote, "On the island of Sicily, where the heats are excessive, every summer a great number of people died of pestilential fevers. Since snow has started being used, which is now about 25 years ago, the pestilential fevers have stopped, and especially in the city of Messina, it has been observed that every year now, 1,000 fewer people die than before the use of snow, and now every poor craftsman wants bread, wine, and snow." Though probably an exaggeration, Pisanelli's passage testifies to the ubiquity of snow-chilled drinks across wide sections of society by the late 16th century, at least in some places. The treatises are rife with social commentary and with specifications on who precisely should and should not be consuming snow. Authors in favor of cold drinking often conceded that children and the elderly should not be given chilled drinks. The suitability of ice-cold drinks was determined in part by activities and lifestyle. Following Galen, Monardes suggested that cold drinks were specifically for those who have a lot of business and worry about many things, such as the governors of cities and of republics and their ministers who participate in similar efforts and thoughts, and those who work with their bodies, especially soldiers, and those who travel by horse at a speedy pace. Those who live a life of leisure should abstain from iced water. Needless to say that those who lived a life of leisure in early modernity were the first to reach for cold drinks. Most villas built for leisure in this period had their own ice houses. After all, cold drinks were a fitting treat for a leisurely afternoon in the Renaissance garden. Throughout early modernity, the discussion on ice drinks invited comparison between selves and past others, between selves and faraway others, and between selves and others of different social rank. These comparisons reveal how early modern physicians and readers contemplated their iced beverages in the context of a global and transhistorical imaginary. Even in places where iced beverages had long become ingrained in local culture, their origins were always traced back to distant pasts and foreign places. Whether physicians liked it or not, ice consumption was there to stay. In practice, evidence overwhelmingly suggests that environmental or medical contexts did not determine the patterns of consumption around ice and snow. In the end, cold consumption was just as much a matter of taste. Chilled drinks floated perpetually in the gray area where pleasure meets necessity. And so, to conclude, I will end with Monardes, who neatly highlighted the meeting points of taste, pleasure, and need in consumption. Many say that they've lived their lives without snow and will continue to do so, but they do not consider that to live, all one would need is beef, beans, and onions. Drinking cold with snow is in accordance with the taste of the palate, the delight of the heart, and the appetite, which has our same nature to preserve. Thank you.